Welcome to This Week in Health IT News, where we look at as many stories as we can in 20 minutes or less that are going to impact health IT. It's Tuesday News Day, and here's what we have on tap. The ONC awards the Sequoia Project as TEFCA's recognized coordinating entity. You know, sometimes I pick a story and I realize I'm going to just dig in because I want to know more about TEFCA. I want to understand where it's at, when it's going to impact health IT, what are some of the ancillary things around it, and so that's what I did. I looked at a handful of stories on this from the Impact Advisors site, TEFCA in a nutshell part 2. Took a look at the U.S. core data for interoperability work that was going on, USF Health Online, ONC and CMS proposed rules, so forth and so on. I read a bunch of government stuff this weekend, and I thought I would share with you what I've learned around TEFCA. So this is going to be the TEFCA episode. I'm sure I'll revisit it again. I've reached out to the ONC and would like to get somebody from the ONC on the show to talk to this more in detail on a Friday episode. So my name is Bill Russell, recovering healthcare CIO and creator of This Week in Health IT, a set of podcasts and videos dedicated to developing the next generation of health IT leaders. This podcast is sponsored by Health Lyrics. Professional athletes have coaches for every aspect of their life to improve performance, yet many CIOs and health executives choose to go it alone. Technology is taking center stage in healthcare. Get a coach in your corner. Visit healthlyrics.com to schedule your free consultation. Finally, check out our 2 new free services. We have This Week Health Insights and This Week Health Staff Meeting. Insights is for individuals looking to propel their career forward. Staff Meeting is for managers who are looking for a way to introduce their staff to some new thinking and get the conversation started in the right direction. If either of those are of interest, hit the website, hit subscribe, and you can subscribe right there. And a lot of you already have, and it's a lot of fun developing those videos for you to get delivered to your inbox. So let's get to the news. Now, before we get into TEFCA and where it's going and whatnot, this is not an endorsement of this approach or direction. As you've heard, if you've listened to the show for any period of time, I'm really more of a patient-mediated exchange kind of person. I believe that that would be a better mechanism. It would be more viable long run. I think it would be less intrusive long run. I think there would be it would move faster. I think it would ride on the coattails of the market, and I think it would have more value to the patient. And in the end, I think it would deliver a much better solution. With all that being said, I'm off my soapbox. We're going to talk about TEFCA. Let's see where it's going. So here's what's coming. Here's where TEFCA sort of comes. It comes out of the 21st Century Cures Act, which was sometime around December 2016. This will give you an idea of how this is not exactly moving very quickly, and you might fall into a false sense of security that you don't have to do anything around it. And I'm not sure that's the case. It is moving slowly, but it's getting there. It's starting to form. We're starting to see what's going to happen. So 21st Century Cures Act 2016 had something in there called information blocking, which many people struggled to really understand, and there was a lot of back and forth of what information blocking really meant, and we'll go into that in a little later. It's still a little vague, but I think it's starting to crystallize, to be honest with you, of what that's going to look like. Let's see, January 5th, 2018, Health and Human Services released the draft specification for TEFCA, Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement. Okay, so it has really two parts of it, the Trusted Exchange Framework and a Common Agreement that once final will define standards for interoperability as required by the 21st Century Cures Act. April 19th, 2019. Oh, by the way, the person who wrote this article did a phenomenal job, and it's on the Impact Advisors site. Dan Golder wrote a handful of these and just exceptional articles. You should check them out, Impact Advisors site. They have a lot of good articles. This is really exceptional. April 19th, 2019, Health and Human Services released its long-awaited update to TEFCA. The proposed rule built on what HHS said earlier. So what is it? We sort of talked about this. TEFCA strives to establish a single on-ramp for the sharing of data. It will enable providers, hospitals, and other healthcare stakeholders, read into that, quite frankly, patients and payers and and other entities to join any health information network and then automatically connect and participate in nationwide health information exchange. ONC's stated goals are for TEFCA are provide a single on-ramp to nationwide connectivity, electronic health information securely follows the patient when and where it's needed, and supports nationwide scalability. I listened to a couple podcasts on this, and people were just going off on, if there was a business case for this, it would have been developed. And the answer to that is there are business cases to be developed. They just do not benefit the people who hold the cards. I'll give you, here's my example. We wanted to share information across our entire health system, so we were in Northern California, Southern California, and West Texas. And at the end of the day, we did the research and realized that number of people from West Texas that ended up in one of our facilities in Southern California was so minuscule over the course of close to a 20-year period, millions of patients. It was so minuscule. I mean, it was less than 100 that had made that trek. And so from a business case standpoint, did it really make sense for me as the CIO to make sure that we were sharing data effectively between West Texas and Southern California? And some people could make the case, and they have on the podcast, they were making the case on Kaiser, doesn't really share information really effectively between Maryland and Southern California. Again, the case is, if there's no business case there, well, here's the business case. I mean, the business case is that there's a ton of people in Silicon Valley right now who are looking to get access to this data so that they can start to innovate around the patient experience, around the patient. Well, the powerful brokers and stakeholders that really don't want Silicon Valley to innovate, quote unquote, and we can argue that and we can go back and forth, but the powerful are the EHR providers. It's quite frankly, it's everybody. It's everybody who has an established business, and we're not talking about small businesses here. We're talking about billions, billions of dollars in businesses. The providers don't really have an incentive to share the data much, except in their local markets where they're trying to build out clinically integrated networks. And do I really need to share my data with Northern California, with Oregon, with others? It doesn't make sense. And quite frankly, with the cost of healthcare, the cost of running IT within healthcare today, am I going to rise this up to the level of, say, creating new consumer experiences? Probably not, to be honest with you. So I'm not going to be spending that kind of money. There's a lot of me. Let me get back to the TEFCA at this point. So they're trying to share data, share across a broader spectrum. And again, to close out that case, my case is that if the data was available to more entrepreneurs in less cost to them, because right now they have to pay certain entities to get access to that data, so then it slows them down, first of all, to get access, and second of all, it costs more money for the solutions that they're developing. And TEFCA and ONC, they're trying to say, hey, you don't have to pay for the data, and because you don't have to pay for the data, and they also want to make it available. A case can also be made that if the providers were able to make money, as opposed to the EHR providers making money from the sharing of data, that there would be more of a market, because I would look at my health system and say, hey, let's start sharing data. Anyway, let's take a look at, so exchange purposes have been updated, and this was this article is probably in June or something to that effect. So HHS has defined and broadened a specific subset of payment and health care operation purposes for TEFCA, and that is treatment, benefits determination, quality assessment and improvement, business planning and development, public health, utilization review, and individual access services. So TEFCA defines some business cases around why you would want to share this data. There they are. How this is going to work is you're going to have the what do they call it? The qualifying entity? Sequoia was named the Recognized Coordinating Entity, the RCE. And then you're going to have qualified health information networks, which are going to be the subsets with that are sharing information across the national network. So the qualified health information networks are going to have a handful of ways that they're sharing data. They're going to share data They're going to do broadcast query, targeted queries, message delivery, or a push. So here's what they look like. Request for a patient's EHI from all QHINs. That's the broadcast. Targeted query is request the patient's EHI from a specific QHIN, and then a push is QHIN delivery of a patient's EHI to one or more specific QHINs. So you're starting to see this materialize in terms of how they're going to govern it, how it's going to be designed, and then how the data is going to be moved around the qualified health information networks. So security requirements for exchange. All right, so they're starting to put together the security requirements for exchange. This is one of the major pushbacks of TEFCA and other things that are coming down from ONC and CMS, which is, hey, you know what? You're telling us we have to share the data. You're not giving us. You're not telling us how it's going to be protected. Well, they have a handful of things and a lot of specifications. I'm not going to go into them. They're using NIST. They're using they're using a bunch of different specifications that have been used in the federal government. In other areas, identity proofing, user authentication, breach notification, EHI disclosure outside of the U.S., meaningful choice, security labels, and so forth. So they have defined a set of security requirements. There's still more work to be done in this area, but they are defining the security. So I'm saying all this to say this is starting to move a little faster. I don't think there's a ton of work for us to do today around TEFCA per se, but if you're a provider. But there is, you need to be aware of it, you need to know where it's going, and you need to know what they're trying to accomplish. And they're trying to accomplish the sharing of certain data today across the entire nation, and then the ability to the ability to expand the data that is going to be shared. I'm going to share a little bit later of what data they're looking at sharing. So qualified, let's go into this a little bit. So how does it work? The qualified networks are a vehicle to help facilitate standardized methodology for HIE interconnectivity, along with a new administrative organization, the Recognized Coordinating Entity, which was given to the Sequoia project, which is not a real huge shock to anyone, given their work to date in this space. In fact, I hadn't read anywhere where someone was surprised that is who it was awarded to. So let's break this down. Trusted Exchange Framework. So standardization, transparency, cooperation, and non-discrimination, privacy, security, and safety, access, population level data. So that the Trusted Exchange Framework establishes, again, based on the 21st Century Cures Act, represents a set of 6 common principles serving as rules of the road for information exchanges that are designed to facilitate trust among the HINs. And by the way, your HIE today, your regional HIEs and the HIEs you're in today, they will have to apply to become qualified health information networks. And some may do that because there's funding and money associated with it, and some may not. I'm not sure why they wouldn't, but some may not for reasons that aren't apparent to me yet as I'm reading this stuff. And by the way, I would really encourage you to do your own research. At this point, what you're getting from me is a dump of what I went through this weekend, and podcasts I listened to and things I've tried to go deep in this one area, which is what I do every now and then when something big comes along, just to make sure that I can be coherent and participate in the conversation. So standardization, transparency, cooperation and non-discrimination, privacy, security and safety, access, and population level data. So those are the 6 common principles for the Trusted Exchange Framework. Now that's TEF. The CA is Common Agreement. The Common Agreement establishes the governance necessary to scale TEFCA. The proposed architecture will allow stakeholders the opportunity to participate as participant members, or individual users. The Common Agreement, furthermore, promotes public-private partnership with HHS and will administer 3 layers of governance necessary to scale the proposed system of connected HINs and qualified health information networks. They have the minimum required terms and conditions, additional required terms and conditions, and the Qualified Health Information Network technical framework. Let's see. I'm gonna pick up the pace a little bit here. Got about 5 minutes to go. So the recognized qualifying coordinating entity. So this is important now because now it's been now it's been awarded. So the RCE is the third leg of the TEFCA stool and will establish a public-private partnership for HHS. In that it will be privately owned entity competitively selected by HHS and administer TEFCA. So the RCE will administer TEFCA, and it will have responsibility for virtually all of the key components for administration and implementation of TEFCA, including develop and update and implement and maintain the common agreement, identify designated and monitor qualified health information networks, modify and update the information network technical framework, virtually convene public listening sessions, develop and maintain the process of adjudicating qualified network compliance, and propose strategic strategies to sustain the common agreement at a national level after the initial cooperative agreement period. So those are some of the things that the Sequoia project is going to be doing. So why is the RCE important? Because quite frankly, they're at the center of this whole thing. They're going to administer it, and they're going to make the whole thing sort of work. Now, with all that being said, you might think, wow, this is really coming fast. Well, it is and it isn't. Sequoia's been adopted. What are some of the next things that are going to happen? Let's see. ONC is targeting the first draft of the Common Agreement for the spring of 2020. So the Common Agreement, it hasn't been specified. It won't be specified until the spring of 2020. If everything goes well, there's a lot of people there's a lot of entities to bring together to have conversations. You have to worry about not doing anything that's going to disrupt the current sharing mechanisms that are already in place and the progress that's already been made. You have some legal work, obviously, to do here, and you want to get buy-in. You want to get as much buy-in as possible. So there's a lot of entities, a lot to do. So the draft of the Common Agreement, we're looking at 2020. Let me get back to the U.S. Core Data for Interoperability, USCDI. So what is the USCDI? This USCDI is providing the standards around what data needs to be shared and how it's going to be shared. So interoperability. This is from a different story. This is from the USF Health Online. Interoperability requires a technical framework of hardware, software, and of course information. Each of these issues surrounding it, but the latter, each of these has issues surrounding it. But the latter is an area that the ONC for Health IT is seeking consensus on in order to create standardized data sets that all electronic health records will contain. The USCDI initiative from the ONC aims to develop a minimum set of data classes that will be required to be interoperable on a national scale and implemented by the end of 2018. This pitch is coming a little faster. So the data classes are meant to be iterative and expand strategically over time. Additional classes are being identified for implementation in 2019 and 2020. In other words, the USCDI's goal is to establish what information all electronic health record systems should be able to share no matter where you are in the United States and no matter what differences exist between the systems and services providers of any given health facility. The USCDI has built-in task force, the goal of which is to make recommendations about drafts of the policy and its proposed expansion process, as well as incorporate stakeholder feedback. And some of our listeners are on that task force, and we're going to have a guest in the not too distant future who's also on that task force. So, and it just goes on to talk about, why the standards and whatnot. If you have done any interoperability and data sharing work in healthcare, you understand why there's standards needed. Now, the good news is they're not coming up with new standards. What they're defining is what the data is that's going to be shared, and it's pretty standard stuff. If you set up a clinically integrated network, it's standard stuff. You're going to see demographics, let's see. Wow, that's small. Let's see. Wish I could blow that up. I think it's listed somewhere else. Well, okay, I'll try to read it. I don't have it listed somewhere else. So it's mostly demographics. You have some, I have a graphic over here. Much better. Let's go to the graphic. No, not that much better. I apologize. So let me see. Here's what we have. Patient name, date of birth, race, smoking status, laboratory value results, problems, medication, allergies, care team members, immunizations, unique device identifiers for a patient's implantable device. That's important, obviously. Provenance. So that's something new. That's essentially just giving us, who's working on the record. Sex, preferred language, ethnicity, laboratory tests, vital signs, medications, health concerns, assessment of plan of treatment, procedures, goals, clinical notes. Now the cool thing about this is, again, they're just a lot of this. They're going off of established, established things, SNOMED and ICD-10 and other things that are readily available. So you're starting to see all these various things come together. They're also planning for this data to be shared across FHIR, which is obvious. And and actually, I going a little long here, so I'll close this up. But one of the things that people like to say is, they don't see where it's really clearly defined what data blocking is. And they define the need, but they don't really define it. I think this USCDI gives you a pretty good picture of what data blocking is going to be. So they identify these data sets, and eventually it will grow, and it'll grow into payer information as well and some other things as we sort of move forward. So this is going to be the mechanism for identifying what data it needs to be shared for the 21st Century Cures Act, which means that your EHR providers are going to need to be able to share this, or they will probably be subject to whatever governance is in place for this to say, hey, you're blocking data. If you're not willing to share this data via FHIR to a qualified health information network, that will probably be considered data blocking. All right, so I try to end each one of these stories with a so what, and I didn't really get to everything I wanted to talk about, but here's the so what. TEFCA itself is moving pretty slowly, but it's something that should really be on your radar. If you're large enough, you should probably assign somebody to it to monitor it and understand what's going on. If you have the resources, bring in a consultant to talk. I don't do this kind of consulting, so it's not a self-promotion, but bring in a consultant to talk to you about this so that you understand clearly how it resides and how you're going to coach and move your players to make sure that your health system is compliant. I think there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done at the EHR space. I think they're going to fight it, as evident by some of the comments that have been made recently. I think there's a lot of players that are going to fight it, to be honest with you. There's still a belief that the patients won't know what to do with the data, which I disagree with. I think once the data is out there, that there will be an ecosystem that arises that will help patients to understand what to do with the data. I think there's a belief that the data provides a competitive advantage. If I have the data, it's a competitive advantage. It's not as easy for the patients to move around. And quite frankly, that's one of the things that the government's going after. HIPAA is about portability, and it's always sort of been about that, is giving the consumers some choice, giving them the option to go where they need to get to in order to get the best care. And to be able to understand and know what that best care is and who's delivering it within your community. It also gives the CMS and other players the ability to identify good providers versus less than good providers. And there's a belief that you're going to be able to make a market. That's how one side thinks about it, to be honest with you. The other side thinks about it in terms of the ability for the government to really have more of a let's say a prescriptive method for making healthcare better. So if they're able to identify the players that are charging too much and whatnot, they can address those specific needs. So it's interesting because you have bipartisan support on addressing this, maybe to two different ends, but it is what it is. And I don't know what the ends are, and I'm not really promoting either end. I'm just essentially saying that the sharing of data, especially down to the patient, is something that both parties really agree on, and we'll have to see how this plays out. So getting back to your health system, stay ahead of this, understand the requirements, really get to know this US CDI, get to know it, understand it. You're already sharing this data today, maybe not through FHIR, but likely through FHIR. You're already able to share it that way. Understand what your EHR capabilities are. Understand that some of this data may or may not be in your EHR, and you may have to bring it in another way. Although it all looks, from where I sit, most of it looks like it sits in your EHR. And so understand where your EHR provider is taking you, how they're thinking about it, and what charges are available, what charges you're going to incur as a result of this work. Do you need to be on a more standardized build? Is there a certain upgrade you need to be a part of? So a lot of interesting stuff going on. I think it's generally, I think it's good for the patient. I think it's good for communities. It represents some work for IT. It represents costs for healthcare IT. So just something we have to plan for, something we have to be ahead of. So let's see. That's about it. That's about all we have time for this week. So thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. Keep your comments coming. Bill at thisweekinhealthit.com. It's fantastic. I appreciate your feedback. Every Friday, check in for the interviews. I actually leave today for the Health Catalyst Conference in Salt Lake City. Hope to have some videos for you from there, and some good conversations, some great speakers. I'm really looking forward to that. This show is a production of This Week in Health IT. For more great content, you can check out our website at thisweekhealth.com or the YouTube channel at thisweekhealth.com/video. Actually, I'm not even sure that link works anymore. Just go to thisweekhealth.com, click on YouTube, you'll get there. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.